So, the concert was last night. It was the big Starcraft concert. They were Flasic, I think it's called. Flasic in all caps. It's this orchestra, this Korean orchestra, and they do StarCraft 1 music. So it was kind of cool. Like, I went down, it was in the Sejong Theater, right across from Gongbyeokgung, which is the big palace, right across from the U.S. Embassy and stuff like that area, right near the capital. So anyways, it was super fancy place, and hold on, I'm gonna mute this for now so we can actually talk about this for a moment. I'll play that after. Anyways, I met up with Tasteless, and I had my daughter with me, my oldest daughter, 10 years old, Ari. She plays piano, so she's really interested in this type of thing. So anyways, we meet up with Tasteless and we go down, and it's like this big, beautiful place. And so I go up to this ticket counter because it says at 5:30 they're giving out the tickets. And I had already ordered mine. Tasteless had already ordered his. I go up and he's like, "Oh no, he was selling tickets that they hadn't sold yet." He's like, "Okay, go over that window." So I go over the other window, the other side, and no one's there. And so I'm like, "Oh, that's kind of weird." So I wait a few minutes. I go back to him. I'm like, "No one's there." He's like, "Oh, it'll be like 5 minutes." I'm like, "Okay." So I wait 5 minutes. No one's there. I go over. There's no one at the other windows. And they're like, and like they run around and call and stuff. And eventually people get there, but they were like 30 minutes late or something from the time that they were supposed to give out the tickets. So anyways, finally they come in and they sit 6 people down and they call us forward. And so I'm like one of the first people in line. So I walk up and I immediately start talking to the woman to get my tickets that I reserved. And she's like, "We're giving out the tickets at 6. So I look at my watch. 5:59. It's 5:59. So we just stare at each other for 1 minute. And then she gets me my ticket. And I'm just like, what are we doing? You're a half hour late, but we have to wait that minute. And it's not like she was doing other things to get ready. She just sat there and looked at me. Like, wow, okay. Anyways, I got my tickets. So I get my tickets, and so at this point it is just, yeah, me and Tasteless and my daughter. So we go out to get some food. We just find a Korean barbecue place around the corner. We go up, and this restaurant, man, was the worst restaurant I've ever eaten at in Korea. It was seriously bad. The woman just did not want to help us. Yeah, Korean barbecue. And so we order some food, and we try to order 2 helpings, and she's like, "No, 3." Like, okay, I guess we'll have 3 helpings. It was ogyapsal, like a thicker, higher quality samgyeopsal, I guess. Anyways, the stuff they brought was like very, very fatty and stuff, which I know a lot of Koreans like, very fatty foods. Like a lot of fat on the meat. Wasn't a huge fan of it, but like we couldn't get her to bring us anything. Okay, like my daughter ate up all the pajeon side dish, and I kept trying to ask her for more. And she was just like not having it. She was like acting like she didn't know what we were talking about. Mine and Nick's Korean's easily good enough to function completely at a restaurant, and my daughter's fluent. And eventually we get it. It's like, okay. And then we asked for salt to dip the meat into, because it's really good if you have Korean barbecue. You want to just dip it a little bit of salt on it. Makes it just like, mwah, beautiful. So delicious. And so we ask her for salt, and she's like, okay. And so she goes off, and we're waiting. And there's only 2 other customers in the whole place, by the way. So it's not like it's busy. And she just doesn't get salt. And I'm like, what is she doing? And so I call her over again. I'm like, "We want salt." I mean, this is in Korean and stuff. Anyways. And she's like, "Oh, yeah, okay." And so a couple minutes later, she finally goes to get salt. And I'm like yelling to her, and she's not that far away. I'm like, "Hey, wait. We want 2. We want 2, because Nick's sitting over there, and me and my daughter are sitting over here, and we want a salt on both sides so everyone can dip." And so she's halfway back with the salt, and it's only 10 feet or 12 feet or something like that, right? So she's halfway back with the thing of salt. I'm like, "2K, Giselle." And she fucking gave me a scowl. She gave me a scowl that I wanted a second salt dish. She was like, and it was so fucking hilarious. I just started to laugh. Like, I was laughing really hard. And then she cracked a smile and started to laugh because it was so ludicrous that she was salty at me for wanting salt. I just don't even get it. And there's two sides of the table. Where the fuck is the salt going to go? The barbecue's in the center. How are we going to reach? Is Nick going to put his hand over the cooking meat to get the salt? That doesn't even make sense. Anyways, she finally gets that for us. Some other funny things that happened at that restaurant, like, there's these things called moule tissue. It's just like a wet wipe that's in a little bag that they put on your table at Korean barbecues so that at the end of the dinner, you can get everything off your fingers, right? If you got a little bit dirty from it, you got a little bit of, grease or whatever. Halfway through our meal, she came over and she took our 3 moule tissues and left. She just took them off the table and walked away as if we, weren't going to use them, which I thought was funny. Also, I tried to get, she brought us a water after I asked a few times. And then we used it all, and I asked for another one. And she's like, oh, okay. And she, walks away with it. 10 minutes later, we have no water. And I'm like, can we please have more water? And it was hilarious. She was terrible. The restaurant was terrible. I couldn't believe it. Anyway, so we get all done that. We go back to the theater. We go in to, Nick grabs his tickets. I already have my tickets for me and my daughter. We're actually sitting in different locations. We bought our tickets at different times and stuff. Nick went to the second floor. I went to the first floor. We go in. Actually, 3 seats down from me was Castro Muse, which was pretty funny because we didn't book together, but we were right near each other, so that was fun. And we were second row. We had VIP tickets, but honestly, we couldn't see anything. We saw the front row of that orchestra, and we couldn't see anything behind it because we're eye level with them. Whereas Nick could see everything because he was on the second level, so probably should have gotten that. So, anyways, the orchestra was cool. They told everyone turn your phones off. There's no electronic devices, no recording, no pictures, no nothing, which I really appreciated because it kind of made everyone be in the moment. You don't see people holding up their phones like morons. So that was really cool. The music was really good. It was fun because there was this orchestra part, and then there was also something when they were talking about it at the end. I didn't pick up everything because there's a lot of words in music that I don't know in Korean, but there was a part of it was a band, which was 2 guitar guys, a lead guitar and a backup guitar, a keyboard, and 2 drum sets, right, that were on the side. But they were really integral. They basically did the Zerg music, and they were heavily in the Terran music. And then the orchestra was in both of those at parts as well. But if you think about the music, right, Zerg needs some very different sounds in music, and Terran needs some very different sounds in music. And then Protoss is actually more, I don't know what to call it, orchestratic. It's more orchestratic music. But anyways, so we're watching, and I gotta tell you, the fucking guitar guy and the drum guy, I was I have to tell the guys in the chat about this lead guitar guy, because he had to do some solos during Zerg and Terran, and he was fucking ripping it up. He was such a badass. He was killing it. Because there's parts that are basically guitar. Okay? And he is just destroying, and he's super handsome and shit. I'm this guy is a fucking giga, Chad. This guy's amazing. He is destroying, and at the end of the songs, everyone's cheering for him. He's just got kind of a little smile on his face because he knows he's killing it. Also, the main drum guy had this really weird electronic drum thing that had different types of sounds in it. And he basically, one of the Zerg songs, he basically had to solo the whole thing. It was crazy. It was really cool. And all the music was good. Yeah, and there was the band also had the backup guitar guy that was basically always on doing little, I don't know what you call anything in music, but strumming basically the entire time that evening. And they had the piano girl who actually had crazy hair. She was rocking out, but that was very cool. One thing I do want to mention is I don't know anything about music. I don't know anything about orchestras or anything like that. But the conductor, what is the conductor doing? because the conductor like walks out and gets cheered, and we clap for her all the time. She turns around after every song and does deep bows, and we're all clapping, and it's like it feels like she's getting all of the praise for playing none of the music. And I know that she's up there waving her wand and stuff. Yeah, everyone's saying that she synchronizes and stuff, but isn't everyone looking at their sheet music? Like, what are people actually looking at her for cues? Like, I don't know, but I mean, they all did a great job. I clapped for her. I don't know anything about it. But it was kind of crazy, kind of awesome. There were some funny aspects to it. First off, they had Starcraft sound effects during parts of the song. Like, you'd hear, like, the fire bat talking and stuff, and, like, you'd hear, like, someone clicked on an overlord here during the Zerg song, and someone clicked on a spawning pool here, and all that type of thing. They also had 3 different screens where they had things like the build command, right? Like, it shows, like, a Zealot building in a gateway, and then they have, like, up on this big screen, they have a gateway warping in, and then the Zealot pops out there. Not synchronized. So it's like the Zealot will be building, and then the Zealot pops out up there. And I'm like, is it synchronized? I look over. No, it's not. And then they had all these game clips that were happening, especially during the Protoss music towards the end. They kind of waited for the Protoss. They did like Zerg music, then Terran music, then Protoss music, then Terran music again to close. So I wasn't too surprised by that, because the Zerg music's kind of the really weird stuff that's mostly the drum guy and a little bit of the guitar guy and not much of the orchestra, so it kind of makes sense to just do that because it's so different. And then, like, they did Terran, and then the orchestra was much more involved, it felt like, with the Protoss music, maybe because it's more orchestratic, like I talked about before. But anyways, so they're doing the Protoss music, and they had like cutscenes, like Dougal, like on his ship and stuff, and it was kind of cool, right? Like, it shows all these different parts. The opening had the opening sequence of StarCraft 1 when you start the game up in single player, so that was kind of cool. They, like, opened with that and then started music, you know, that went along with it. It wasn't just the themes, it was also the, like, in-between music, the cutscene music, stuff like that. And so anyways, especially during the Protoss part, this was so funny. They had these battle scenes that they had made where it's like 20 Dark Templars attack moving into a sunken colony and like 20 Hydras with Overlords sitting there, and they just fight. And I'm like watching that, listening to the music, and I'm like, what? And then like after, as that battle's like almost wrapping up, then it switches to another battle, and it's 30 Archons fighting against 8 Hydralisks. I'm like, okay. And then it's 100 supply of Hydra Lurker on BGH walking through a choke without attacking, getting Psy-stormed. Over and over and over, just millions of Psy-storms. I'm like, okay. And then it goes back to the Dark Templars attack moving the Hydras. And then we have a different scene of Psy-storms going off on an army, and it just kept doing this. And it was like, now here's 20 Archons killing bunkers. And it's like, what? It was really funny. Like, Tasteless and I, like, we talked about it a little bit afterwards. It was, man, it was hilarious battles that just didn't even make sense. And occasionally it was on fastest, and occasionally it was on like 2x. Like, I don't even get it. Like, they had different speeds. But that was fun. At the end, the conductor came, you know, on the stage, and everyone's clapping and bowing and stuff, and she starts talking to the audience a little bit and kind of gets the audience involved. It was fun. And this part I thought was pretty funny. She actually asked the audience, she's like, who's a Terran player here? Where are the Terran players? And like 10 guys that were all sitting right near each other. It was 8 to 10 guys, I would say. All raise their hands and be like, yeah, Terran. And I was like, oh, cool, okay. This is, hand to God, this is exactly what happened, okay? So I'm like, oh, all right, there's actually some Terran players here, pretty cool. And so, you know, everyone's like, oh, cool, those are the Terran players. And then she asked, how about Protoss players? Do we have any Protoss players here? And I kid you not, I am not exaggerating, almost the entire place put their hands up. It was fucking crazy. Almost everybody there put their hands up. I looked, I was like, oh my God. And my daughter's like, everyone plays Protoss. And just, I mean, you guys can ask the other people that were there. Like, everybody raised their hands when she asked who plays Protoss. And then she asked who played Zerg, and it was a fair amount. It was more than the Terran. It was like maybe 20-ish people raised their hands. It was a huge theater. There was like a ton of people in there. So, you know, that happened. I thought that was hilarious. So then she actually went over to the people playing, the orchestra and the band, right? And she was going to ask them who played what race, right? Now, here's the thing. These are like real professionals. These are sick, badass musicians, okay? So almost no one raised their hand. Almost no one raised their hands overall. And it was really funny to see who raised their hands that was playing music, because there was a lot of people on stage, man. A lot of people in that orchestra. Like 10 violin players, and then like the slightly bigger violin, they had like 8 of those. And, they just, there was so many. There was a ton of people there. So she asked. So first off, there's 2 parts, the band part and the orchestra part. The band part played StarCraft. The orchestra part didn't. So, like, apparently if you play, like, violin, right, like, you don't have time. If you want to be a professional violin player, I guess you just don't play StarCraft. But anyway, she asked, who plays Terran? And I kid you not, because this was at the very end of the show, and I had already decided in my head I was going to tell you guys about the Super Chads on the drums and the guitar, like the lead guitar guy and the lead drummer guy that just destroyed during Zerg and Terran. And so there were 2 Terran players. The lead guitar guy and the lead drummer guy were both Terran players. Crazy. No one in the orchestra. And then she asked who's the Protoss players. And it was the piano woman that had the crazy hair and the backup guitar guy, right? So almost everyone in the band played and no one in the orchestra. Okay? And then she asked, are there any Zerg players? And one guy in the orchestra in the far back held up his French horn. And that was the only guy that played Zerg from the whole thing. Which I thought was hilarious, because he's like literally playing an instrument that I only know the name of because I attended 4th grade music class. So he was the Zerg player. And that was pretty funny. So those were the people that played the various races, and I thought that was hilarious. They did a slight encore at the end, 2 Terran songs, because that is the best music, of course. It was a good time. It was a lot of fun. And oh yeah, in the very last song they allowed cameras with pictures and recording and stuff, and everyone was really happy about that. I guess, let people get a few pictures and stuff like that. So I'll show those to you guys later. Yeah, it was a really fun night. Yeah, it was cool. It's good times. No, she doesn't ask about random players. Yeah, I muted. Okay, so there's the story. Let me play both these now.